On the 20th of March 2019, I landed in Tokyo's Narita Airport, Japan. On the 20th of March 2020, I left Kansai Airport just outside of Kyoto. I've had a year, well, just over a year really, to reflect on that. Although it feels weird to talk about it because, 2020. It feels more like 5 years ago since I left Japan. But I wanted to talk about what I've learned in that year since having to leave Japan, whether I'll go back, and what the future looks like for me. So let's start at the beginning. Why was I in Japan in the first place? I went out to Japan on a working holiday visa. For those of you who don't know, this visa is available to people from select countries and has an age limit. In the case of the UK, you have to be under 30 at the time of application, and it allows you to work and travel around Japan for 12 months. I had a fantastic 12 months in Japan. I volunteered in a few different places. I lived in several different towns. I got the chance to travel in a way that would be much more difficult if you were just going for a week, 2 weeks. I met some fantastic people. I even had the chance to be running my own izakaya bar for a while. Coming up to the end of the year, I applied for this job at a travel agency in Kyoto and was really surprised when I got it because I thought I'd flunked the interview entirely. So for the last 6 weeks of my visa, I got to live and work in the old capital of Japan. Unfortunately, this was February 2020. Probably the worst time in recent history to have started working in Japanese tourism, other than, the Tohoku earthquake aftermath. All of our tours were cancelled, but this is not why I had to leave Japan. I was still being offered a working visa by the company. The CEO had actually run a tour company during the aftermath of the Tohoku earthquake, so he knew that Japanese tourism would bounce back, and he was confident that the coronavirus situation would be under control fairly soon. Unfortunately, the situation meant that my visa renewal was delayed, so I simply couldn't switch to a working visa from my working holiday visa, and I had to leave. I remember the last thing the second in command in the office said to me was, "You're coming back, right?" And I assured her that was the case. I wanted to come back to Japan. I'd just really started my life there. After a year of travelling, here I was with a stable job that offered visa sponsorship and paid a decent wage. It was the perfect situation for me. Leaving Japan on the 20th of March was a total scramble. I'd literally found out 2 days before that I was going to have to leave and that my visa wasn't getting renewed. So I packed up my room in my share house, shoved all my stuff back in bags. I left a box of belongings at the office that I didn't think I would need in England, and I left the country. It was a bit of a surreal situation. Kansai Airport was totally deserted. My flight to Changi was a ghost flight. I mean, there was about 7 of us passengers on the way, and then my flight from Changi to London was the complete opposite, overflowing with Brits who'd been in Australia and got stranded. Singapore Airlines at the time was the only company flying out of there. All in all, the actual experience of leaving was so flustered, so quick and so overwhelming that I didn't really actually have much time to process it, and I don't remember really feeling very much about it other than just mild panic. I didn't know what was happening. I had just spent all of the money I'd earned in my 6 weeks on rent and food and a flight back home all of a sudden. It was like I'd just got settled in place and then I'd been swept off my perch. I remember crying on the flight from Kansai to Singapore, but I think that was mainly because the film I watched was really sad. Also, shout out to the very sweet Singapore Airlines cabin crew who came and checked on me and was like, "Are you all right?" And I kind of, between sniffles, managed to choke out, There's just a lot going on, and it's a very, very sad movie. Well done, that man. Coming back to the UK was so weird. Not just because on the second flight home and at the airport and then at shops the next day I was the only person wearing a mask, but there was the clash of coming back to live with my parents. There was the absolute culture shock of everything. It was just massively overwhelming. I think it was 2 days after I landed. It's hard to tell because times got very weird for me at that point. I sat down, turned on the TV, we tuned in. There was Bojo with his mouth flapping, going, "Yeah, country's in lockdown now. You gotta stay in your house. Don't go out. You can only go out to get groceries. That's it. Locked down." I knew at this point that I needed to get out of there. Big props to my mum and dad for letting me come back to live with them, but here I was, head completely scrambled from being forced out of Japan very quickly and having to rush back to the UK, and the thought of spending the next indefinite amount of time trapped in a house in suburbia made me want to scream. Luckily, my friend from Wales phoned and said, "Hey, I hear you've had to come back to the UK. I need help on my small holding. I've got agricultural work for you to do. I can't get volunteers in at the moment because everything's locked down. Why don't you come and work for me?" And that's what I did all summer 2020, from the start of April, all the way through until the start of September. I worked on my friend's small holding. So I had 2 polytunnels that I filled with produce. We had sheep that we looked after, including rounding them up, shearing them, trimming their hooves, and I raised chickens from eggs. This was probably my favourite project of 2020. I bought the eggs off eBay. My friend's brother had an incubator that we could borrow, and I ended up hatching 8 chicks. And of those 8 chicks, I have 4 hens that live with me now. Parts of it felt like paradise, but honestly, no place really is. And I began to feel a little bit trapped there. I was living in a village about 12 kilometres from the nearest town and on a hill, and there was no work. The prospect of getting paid work just wasn't there, and I couldn't see how I would be able to survive the winter there and feel good about myself. I struggle quite badly with winter depression, and it gets worse when I feel isolated, it gets worse when I don't have funds, and it gets worse when I'm living somewhere cold, damp, and uncomfortable, which is unfortunately what most of my accommodation in Wales has been, because I'm not a millionaire in a lovely, well-heated or well-insulated super eco home. By this point as well, the bad news had come. I'd had my email from the company saying that basically Japan's borders were closed indefinitely, there was no way they could get me back, and there wasn't a role for me anyway, so I just couldn't come back to Japan. As you can imagine, this news was quite hard to take. I mean, here I'd finally found a job. That was the kind of job I'd been searching for years. It was a fairly creative role. It was somewhere I wanted to be, and it paid enough for me to be living a normal adult life. I was actually, in my time in Kyoto, even though I was, budgeting money, keeping money aside, I was still able to go out to karaoke. I was still able to go out to eat. I didn't have to live the way that I'd lived in London, where I was basically in the city but not participating at all. So it was really distressing knowing that I was not going to be able to go back, and it really messed with my mental health. Additionally, though, it made me realise that I did have to leave Wales. I needed to be going somewhere where there was paid work, because otherwise here I was with nothing. I had no savings anymore. I had no job. and I had no career. All I had was myself and all of the belongings that I'd been able to keep at the mothership. Thank you, Mum and Dad, for storing all my crap. It was abundantly clear that I needed to find work again. I had been receiving a little bit of government assistance in the form of universal credit, but as anyone who's actually ever survived on universal credit will tell you, it is impossible to live a long-term, happy existence on it. It's just not possible. So the job search began. Originally, I had this really long rant, this 6-minute rant about why the job market and Etsy, the handmade craft website, suck. But I figured you maybe didn't want to hear me rant about that for 6 minutes when this video is supposed to be a reflection on my time in Japan. So instead, I'll just break down why I struggle so much to find work. And the main reason for me is that actually I've been out of work for most of my 20s. The last time I worked a full-time, well, it wasn't even full-time, but a normal office job in the UK was all the way back in 2014. And then I switched that to just being 1 day a week on a Saturday when I was living and working on a protest camp for years. And then since then, I've been surviving from occasional agricultural work, from selling bits of art, and just kind of being self-sufficient, low income, very, very, very low income, sometimes volunteering for food and board, which is basically the lifestyle that I led for much of my year in Japan, this kind of work away whiffing lifestyle. And it's great, I love it, but it doesn't leave you with any lasting tangible assets. I'm in my early 30s now and I have a buttload of skills. There's millions of things I know I can do, but I don't have the qualifications, I don't have the professional references, and I don't have the career history to back me up. This makes it really, really difficult to find work, especially because every job in the UK seems to need specific qualifications. If you want to work in horticulture, you have to have a horticulture qualification. If you want to be a hairdresser, you've got to study for 3 years. All of these things over and over and over and over and over again make that barrier for work so much harder when you've been out of work, when you don't want to commit to years of study without material reward. It just makes it all really difficult. And on top of that, I kept failing these stupid questionnaires that all this unskilled labour jobs want you to fill out. So I was rejected by loads of companies on the basis of me not fitting their personality questionnaire or whatever. All these rejections take such a huge toll on your mental well-being and on your self-esteem, especially when you know that you can do those things. I have a whole inbox full of rejections from secretarial work, from receptionist work, from customer service roles, either because they just rejected me from looking at my CV, or in the case of a customer service role I interviewed for recently, they said, oh, you couldn't give concrete examples of times at work when you had displayed excellent customer service. I'm sorry, I don't have that kind of memory. Who has space in their brain for memories of days at work? Who has space in their brain for memories so that you can answer questions like, tell us a time at work that you made a mistake and you made it right? I don't know. I don't care. My brain is full of better memories. More interesting fucking memories. I got kicked by a horse in the leg in the shadow of Mount Fuji and went into shock. That occupies quite a lot of my memory cortex. I swam with sea turtles off Hawaii. I went on a road trip all the way from Seattle to San Francisco and my friend drove me back in one night. I don't have space in my brain for days at the office from 2014. So there just doesn't feel like there's a place for me in the modern workforce. I'm not being given this chance, even though I know I could do these jobs. At the same time, I find it so difficult to be like making my art and marketing my art and all these things. It's so hard. I have this time, but I can't get in the right headspace. I put up these barriers. It's not perfectionism, but it is procrastination. I don't believe in perfectionism, and I'm not worried about not making perfect stuff. But I do struggle massively with procrastination. I've suspected for a while, and well, preliminary testing seems to suggest it too, that I have ADHD. I know I'm neurodivergent anyway, because I've struggled with depression, anxiety, and loads of other fun little brain worms pretty much since I was 12 or 13 years old. I want to make my artwork. I want to be able to sell my artwork, but I'm just, it's hard enough anyway when I feel on form and I feel good about myself to do it and to be like, oh, I'm going to try and sell my stuff. My stuff is good enough to sell. It's worth me making art, when you're constantly being told by a job rejection every goddamn day that you're not good enough for anything. It messes with you. I don't have that energy anymore. Like, I find it so difficult. And the things I make, I'm happy with. I like my work. I like the things I produce. But I'm always letting myself down in terms of making it into this career. And I don't know how other people do it. I look at some of the people I went to uni with, and they're now making beautiful ceramics that they're selling, and rightfully so, because they're gorgeous and they obviously put the effort in. And they obviously do persistent practice. They do persistent practice. They are making, they are exploring, they are creating. I don't know how to do that anymore, because I wake up and I go, God, I don't know if I can do this, or is there any point in doing this? Does anyone actually even like my art? And I just let myself get completely bogged down by these stupid brain worms. And then it becomes this cycle. It's like I'm beating myself up, and then I'm beating myself up for beating myself up. It's really hard. But if there's one thing that my time in Japan taught me, it's that I can do these things. I ended up running my own izakaya. It was only for a short amount of time. It was only for 3 months. I couldn't do it long term because I didn't have the kind of visa that would let me do it long term. But I managed to do it in another language. I'd never worked as a professional chef before. I'd never even worked as a bartender before, other than like pouring drinks for people at Royal Ascot. But I managed to do it, and I managed to do it all in Japanese. So I don't know why I can't take that energy and just apply it to other things. I would love to start my own business. I would love to be, running something proper, having a shop or a bar or izakaya again here. But I constantly tell myself that I'm already failing, because my Etsy shop isn't a success, despite all the myriad of ways that Etsy doesn't work. So I don't know what I'm doing on that front. But I did eventually find some paid work. Just before Christmas, I managed to get a job at a well-known fast fashion clothing retailer, and yeah, I spend my weekends there now, and it's soul destroying and I don't like it, but I do like the financial freedom, and I do like being able to pay my parents' rent. But it doesn't feel like a job with a future again. And that's what I'm longing for so much at the moment now. I want a job with a future. So is there a future out there for me that has anything to do with Japan? I don't know, is the answer. I really don't know. The easiest path I could take to get back to Japan would be becoming an English teacher, but this is a role I don't want to do. I have experience in the past from working in schools in the UK. I briefly worked as a teaching assistant and it drove me mad. I hated the rules, I hated all the arbitrary things, and I hated the way that staff were treated. Now, I know from reading about the experiences of ALTs in Japan that those exact problems I had with schools in the UK, I would also find in Japan. I don't want that job and I don't want that lifestyle. So if I want to get back to Japan, there's only a few ways I can do it. Number one, I can become an entrepreneur, get an entrepreneur's visa, and set up a company in Japan. This seems unlikely given my self-esteem issues with setting up a company in a country I already live in, which has a much lower barrier of entry. Number two is getting a job with a company over here that has offices in Japan. Again, I don't think that's very likely considering that I'm struggling to get work anyway. Another problem is that I really let the ball slip with my Japanese study, and that's completely on me. Language is like a muscle. You have to keep flexing it if you want it to stay there. You can't just rely on a foundation that you had from years ago. And this is something I need to get back into. I need to re-engage with my Japanese study. If anything, just for my own mental well-being. Here is something that I did for myself. It's a cool skill. I've got all these books I brought back that I need to read. Now, we all know that buying books and reading books are very different hobbies, but I would still like to read these books. So it looks like the only option to getting back to Japan for me is option number 3, which is marrying a Japanese citizen and getting a spousal visa. And I don't think that's going to happen either. So realistically right now, I don't think I'm going to be able to return to Japan on a work basis. However, I could be trying harder to find other ways to get back. I could be looking at sort of art internships or courses, ceramics courses, anything really to connect me with artisan projects out there. I've got that horticulture connection. Maybe I could go out there and do a course in bonsai or in Japanese permaculture or any of these things. I don't want to give up the idea completely that I will never go back to Japan, even though it feels like that sometimes, because the world's closed because of Corona and also because I'm once again very low income. But it seems so daft to throw away all of that progress I made with my Japanese, throw away those relationships I formed with people in Japan because I don't think I can get back out there. I need to pledge to do this for myself. This needs to be something that I take up again. Learning Japanese, re-engaging with it, and making that decision to focus on that for myself. And I hope I'm going to be able to do it. We're deep into spring now. I don't have this millstone of winter depression round my neck anymore. And there is light at the end of the tunnel, even with the COVID situation, although it doesn't feel like it. When I was living in Kyoto, I met up with an internet friend who was visiting. And she said, I think you really fit here. And I don't know if that's true. Other foreigners have told me that as a foreigner you can never really fit in Japan, but I don't feel like I really fit in the UK either. So what's the harm in trying to at least be an outsider there if I want to be? I don't feel like I belong in this country. This country doesn't feel like it offers me the things that I can get in Japan, even just on the basic level of day-to-day survival. rents in the UK are absolutely insane compared with how much I was paying in Japan, especially in a cheap area like Kochi, which is where I want to go back to. So do I have a future with Japan? I hope so. I don't want to turn my back on that chapter in my life and just think, oh, that was a nice year out of reality. So I hope I can make it happen. I really didn't want this video to just be a depressing list of all the reasons my life sucks and how it all goes back to coronavirus and losing my job in Japan. So I want to end on some positive reflections. There are some experiences from the past 2 years, the year in Japan and the year after it, that I know I'm going to take with me for the rest of my life. Even just like the physical things, the feats of strength, if you will. You know, I left for Japan, I had 38 kilos of luggage and I carried that all over Japan with me. That's really cool. I had a couple of days when I was traveling where I just ended up traveling really far under my own power. I once walked 21 kilometers because I saw a big Buddha on a hill and just kept walking until I got to it and then had to walk back. I cycled 36 kilometers one day because I just wanted to keep going and see the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that's really empowering to know that I have that strength and I can do things like that. My social relationships over the past 2 years have meant so much to me. I am so incredibly grateful both to the friend who hosted me in Wales and to my parents who are still hosting me now. And I'm so glad I got to meet some amazing people in Japan and I got to make friends with them. The first time you tell a joke in another language and it makes other people laugh is like, God, that is the best drug on the planet. If they could bottle that and give that to people, we'd be in bliss forever. I know that people do connect with my art and I know that they do like my art. I've had to date, I think 4 or 5 commissions where people have seen my existing work and said, I love your work, I want it for my house, let's do something custom. That's fantastic. That's something I want to take forward with me. And I guess lastly, most of all, I've started making these YouTube videos and I don't think I would have started making YouTube videos if it wasn't for the past 2 years. I had all these doubts in my head about starting this channel. I thought no one will want to watch my videos because there's millions of videos about gardening and art anyway, and I'm not committed enough to my art. Well, it turns out that some of the people who I've met on my travels over the years, people I've lived with, people who have been part of my community on and off, they really enjoy watching these videos. So a big shout out to all of you, you know who you are. But also I'm starting to connect more with people beyond that, beyond my tiny circle, and I hope I can keep that up. I would love for this channel to become a small community of its own. So this last year hasn't been a write-off. It's been difficult for everyone. I know a lot of us have struggled with 2020 and the fact that it's lasted kind of 16 months rather than 12, it feels like. But I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunities I've had in this time and the fact that I've survived. You know, 120,000 people in my country are dead because of this virus. Maybe it's okay that I didn't spend this time developing some fantastic art career. Maybe it was just enough to get through this with my health intact. I think things are going to be okay. You can never guarantee that, and I've had some shit luck in my life. You know, I lost my first ever real adult job to the 2008 financial crash, and then all these years later I finally find another good solid adult job. I shouldn't call them adult jobs, it makes it sound like it's in the porn industry. But I found another good, stable, well, what I thought would be a stable job, and it was taken from me by another once in a lifetime event. I did break a lot of mirrors when I was a kid, so maybe that's part of it. So it's not all doom and gloom, even if sometimes it feels like it. And I'm really excited for the future in some ways. When I'm not having an existential crisis, sobbing on the floor, thinking about how I don't have a career at 31, I'm looking forward to just the next season and the next thing, and I'm going to be able to move forward with all of these skills and all of these experiences. So I'm going to keep on my journey, and I hope you tune in and stick with me on it as well. And we'll get through this, kind of together.